Good morning and welcome to the webinar on the diversity data collection requirement. My name is Meruni Salalani and I am the Director of Inclusion at the SRA. I will be presenting this webinar jointly with Asiya Rafiq, who is a Diversity Manager within the SRA. This webinar is one of the many events we have held with the profession in raising awareness around the transparency requirement. We began raising awareness of the data collection exercise in 2011 and are continuing the engagement, focusing more on the SRA's approach to implementation. I will start off the session by setting out the background and give you a brief context to the data collection exercise. I will then hand over to my colleague Asiya, who will talk to you in more detail about the implementation process and how the data will be collected in 2012. So why are we collecting diversity data on the legal workforce and where does the requirements come from? The Legal Services Board, which is the oversight regulatory body for approved legal regulators, has set out a requirement for approved regulators. The Legal Services Act 2007 underpins the requirement. The Legal Services Act 2007 includes a set of regulatory objectives which approved regulators like us, the SRA, have to uphold and promote. One of these objectives is about our role in encouraging an independent, strong, diverse and effective legal profession. The SRA and the profession has always promoted equality and diversity. It's been part of the code of conduct for the profession. We believe the promotion of the regulatory objectives as encouraging an independent and diverse legal profession requires collective action and involvement of all of us as a regulator and you as the profession. The Legal Services Board in April 2011 launched a formal consultation on their proposals around increasing diversity and social mobility in the legal workforce. On 26 July 2011, following this consultation, the Legal Services Board made a decision which requires all approved regulators to put in place plans for the collection, reporting and publication of workforce data. They issued statutory guidance in July 2011, setting out their expectations and timescales for the collection of diversity monitoring data from regulated entities, which required entities to give every individual working within the entity or the firm, both lawyer and non-lawyer, an opportunity to self-classify against some of the diversity characteristics. So why are we collecting the exercise? Why are we undertaking the exercise and why is the SRA promoting this process? The SRA supports the underlying principles and outcomes as set out by the LSB. We believe that the promotion and progression of equality and diversity within the legal profession can have real business benefits for the profession. As you are aware, a number of public bodies require legal firms tendering for work to set out their diversity commitments. Other benefits include the ability to recruit a diversity of talent into your firm and enhancing consumer confidence. In 2011, the SRA elevated the equality rule into one of the key principles of outcome-focused regulation. Principle 9 requires firms to carry out their business in a manner that encourages and promotes equality and diversity. One of the indicative behaviors is around collection of workforce data. Therefore, the Legal Services Board's requirement is aligned and supports Principle 9 and as such should not be seen as an addition or separate to that firm has to comply with. In defining our approach for 2012, we have been conscious that the profession is dealing with a lot of change, such as the implementation of OFR. Therefore, we have set out an implementation plan for 2012 which places minimum burden on you as firms. And I will hand over to Asya, who will talk to you more about this. So what are the outcomes that we are requiring? What are the outcomes we are requiring in relation to the diversity collection exercise? The LSB has set out a number of outcomes it expects, and these include that the collection exercise should enable us to raise awareness of the barriers present within the legal profession with regard to access and career progression. It should also provide us with a comprehensive evidence base about the composition of the legal workforce to inform targeted policy responses. It will provide data that can be used as a benchmark to evaluate the effectiveness and impact of existing diversity initiatives. And finally, it will promote transparency about workforce diversity at entity level and better information for corporate and individual consumers and potential employees who can use this to inform their choice of the law firm. I will now hand you over to Asya Rafiq, who will talk to you about the implementation plan.
Thank you very much, Marinisa. I'm going to now talk about how this process will work. So to minimize the impact of this new requirement on the profession, we have asked SurveyLab, an online survey company, to facilitate this process for the first data collection exercise this year. For this first year, firms are simply required to facilitate the data collection process. And they will do this by firstly providing information to us about their workforce, so the number of employees in the firm, and secondly, by circulating the link to the online diversity questionnaire to all employees in the firm. The first contact with your firm will be an email sent to your firm's authorized signatory. An authorized signatory is a nominated individual in a firm of sufficient seniority or responsibility to fulfill this role. So on receipt of this response, your authorized signatory will be sent a further email providing instructions for distributing information about the diversity questionnaire to all employees. This will include a unique link for employees to access the diversity questionnaire, which they will click to open. The authorized signatory within your firm will be required to make sure this is distributed to employees within 2 weeks of receiving this online link. Employees are encouraged to submit the diversity questionnaire by the end of September, early October, and SurveyLab will collate the information on behalf of the SRA and provide each firm with a summary of the data for their workforce, which will be aggregated and anonymous. The aggregated data will be provided back to firms after the survey closes. We're going to aggregate the diversity data received from across the profession, and firms, including sole practitioners and other organisations regulated by the SRA, are required to provide employees with the opportunity to complete the diversity questionnaire. Other approved legal regulators, such as the Bar Standards Board, ILEX and CLC, are also required to collect workforce diversity data for those they regulate. The aim is to obtain an aggregate view of the diversity makeup across the whole legal services sector to enable us to track key trends, promote transparency, and increase diversity and social mobility across the sector. The characteristics we are collecting against are relevant to the public sector equality duty, and we are also collecting against socio-economic factors and caring responsibilities. This will enable us to establish and capture a more comprehensive evidence base across a wide range of diversity characteristics across the legal sector. And one of the ways in which we will use the data is to evaluate the effectiveness and impact of existing diversity initiatives, and we'll also be looking at the effect of caring responsibilities on women's and men's career progression within the legal profession. So, email contact. Email contact will be made with the authorized signatory of the firm and will involve 2 stages. The first stage will be to establish the number of employees in a firm. This will be done through a brief online survey, and we will ask for the total number of employees employed in the firm. The authorised signatory will be required to complete and return this information within 10 days of receipt of this email. The second stage will be for the authorised signatory to distribute a link to the online diversity questionnaire to all employees in the organisation. If the authorised signatory wishes to do so, they can ask a member of their team or an employee from HR to distribute this link on their behalf. Your firm will need to think about a communication strategy or something similar for letting employees know why we are requesting this information and what will happen to the information they provide. We at the SRA will provide you with some guidance and with some suggested wording, such as, for example, you may be aware the SRA is collecting diversity data on the legal profession. This means all employees in a firm are being asked to complete a short online survey providing diversity information about themselves. This will only take a few minutes to complete and your responses will be anonymous. So your firm role also includes facilitating any reasonable adjustment requests disabled employees may have. And if a paper version of the diversity questionnaire is required, please contact us or email us at diversity@sra.org.uk. We have set up this mailbox especially to answer any questions you have during this process. We're encouraging all employees in a firm to complete the questionnaire. This includes individuals who are in managerial, IT, HR, accountancy or other non-regulated roles as well. We want to provide every individual in the workforce the opportunity to self-classify against the diversity categories set out. The survey will cover all the employees of a firm, and this is defined as a person employed or engaged in England and Wales, not overseas or Scotland, for the purposes of providing legal services to clients. This includes partners, those under secondment contracts, consultancy or other arrangements, those employed to provide support functions such as secretarial staff, part-time workers, and includes those on maternity leave and temporary workers who have contracts with the organisation that have run over 3 months or longer. The principles set out in the handbook require cooperation with the FRA to ensure firms run their business in a way which encourages equality of opportunity and respect for diversity. Therefore, the FRA is able to ask for information reports from firms on a periodic basis, and our view is that in terms of the principles set out, we're able to request firms to facilitate the diversity data collection process. So we're reserving the right to conduct sample audits of firms to ensure the authorised signatory is responding to the first email link. The FRA will also monitor the number of returned online diversity questionnaires from each firm. It will be possible to identify the response rate from employees for each firm during the second stage of the exercise. And we will follow up with individual firms where the response rate of submitted diversity questionnaires is very low or where there have been no returns at all. We will want to find out what steps the firm has taken to encourage employees to complete the questionnaire. We've tried to make this as simple as possible for firms to comply with, but ultimately, if firms refuse to support this process, we would have to decide whether to take regulatory action in respect of this failure. The data you provide through the diversity questionnaire will be submitted directly to SurveyLab, the company we have commissioned to carry out this survey for us. They will keep this data confidential and hold it strictly in compliance with the Data Protection Act. SurveyLab will collect together all the information from the diversity questionnaires from your firm and produce a report for your firm showing the aggregated data information for the firm as a whole. This means it will not be possible to see the diversity breakdown for each category of employee. The report will simply show the number of employees within a firm for each diversity characteristic, and the anonymous aggregated data for your firm will be provided to the SRA. We won't be publishing individual firm diversity data, but we'll look to aggregate the whole diversity data across the legal sector. So the diversity questionnaire we are using has been slightly revised, but includes all of the categories as set out with the LSB's model questionnaire. The questionnaire is structured by asking a series of questions on your job role, age, gender, disability, ethnic group, religion or belief, sexual orientation, and as I said earlier, socio-economic factors and caring responsibilities. Please note that individual employees are able to submit the diversity questionnaire without providing data protection and publication requirements.
Thank you, Asiya. I just want to give you an overview around data protection, but also give you an assurance in terms of the arrangements that we've put in place for 2012. As you're aware, diversity data is considered sensitive under the Data Protection Act, and the arrangements that we're putting in place for 2012 have been aligned to comply with the Data Protection Act. The information we are seeking from individuals is data which is going to be anonymous, and the information that we are going to publish is going to be aggregated. By this I mean individuals will be providing their data anonymously to SurveyLab, and when we publish this data, we are not going to publish the data as firm by firm. We're going to publish an aggregated profile of the profession. Therefore, it will not be possible to identify individuals. I also want to talk to you a little bit about publication. As you know, the implementation plans we've set out for 2012 are to minimize the burden on the profession, which is why we've actually sought the services of an external provider to collect the data on our behalf. Therefore, we are not imposing a publication requirement on firms this year to publish the data. However, we are conscious that some of you already publish diversity data on your workforce. We would want to encourage you to continue to do that. Because from 2013, the data collection exercise will be part of the requirement placed on entities, and we will also be imposing a publication requirement on firms to publish the data. I will leave it there, and I will finish off here and hand you over if you've got any questions, which we will try to respond, and we will try to respond to as many questions as possible. Over to you.
Okay, one of the questions that we have had is, will firms have to do this every year? You will be required to collect diversity data for your employees every year, and from next year onwards, you will also be required to publish this data. Another question we've had is, how will this data be kept securely? So the diversity questionnaire we are asking employees to complete and submit is anonymous, and once it has been collated by SurveyLab, it will not be possible to connect a completed questionnaire to a particular individual within the firm. And when the data is collated and reported back to the firm, we will not be providing a diversity breakdown for each category of employee, therefore preventing the risk of an individual being identifiable if the numbers in a particular category are small. And the firm itself must keep diversity data securely, even though it is anonymous.
Okay, we've got a question here which says, can I get a copy of these slides? The answer is yes. They will be put on the SRA website from next week, so you will be able to access the slides. Another question that's come through is whether we will be continuing to use the SurveyLab. We will be continuing to use SurveyLab from 2013, which is after the first year. We will not be continuing the services of SurveyLab. This was only for 2012 because it's a standalone exercise that we are currently undertaking, and it's to minimize the burden on firms for 2012. From 2013, we are going to include the requirement as part of the annual reporting cycle for firms, and we are also going to be imposing the publication requirement.
How long will we keep all the survey data for? We are looking to keep this survey data at a minimum for approximately 3 months, and then all the data that has been submitted to SurveyLab will be deleted, and we will, at that point, we will have aggregated the data for the whole profession. And we understand that it might feel like a big burden on firms, and that in some firms this data will be collected twice, but we are required to provide the opportunity and we also need to request them to facilitate this process. And so although it may feel like a burden, we do need to ensure that this happens, and we're looking to go live within the next couple of weeks. If you require more information on reasonable adjustments, we can provide you with this. What we are asking firms to do is that if they need to make reasonable adjustments for their employees, then they need to facilitate that themselves. But if you do need any additional information, please let us know. We will have copies of the paper application form which you can request from us, and we can send out to you.
Okay, we've got a question here around whether the SRA will be reporting to the Legal Services Board about how well solicitors' firms are complying with the diversity data collection. We will be providing a report back to the LSB around the diversity profile that we are going to publish in terms of aggregated data, and obviously information around how the solicitors' profession as a whole is complying with the requirement. We, at this stage, are not intending to provide information on individual firms and whether they are complying or not.
Okay, somebody has asked a question in terms of, I have a very small firm, the data can't be confidential. Even though your firm is small, it is still required to participate in this data collection exercise. Survey Lab will aggregate the diversity data provided to reduce the risk of identification. Whether a really small number of employees in an organisation or a small number of individuals in a particular category, there is a risk that anonymity cannot be ensured, but we are letting all employees and all firms know that this data is going back in an aggregated format to the firm. Your firm will ensure the anonymised data will be kept securely, and only those persons whose role requires them to access the anonymised data are able to access it. If you do have any concerns about being identified, you always have the option of selecting the prefer not to say, and also with speaking to your firm if you don't wish to complete the questionnaire.
Okay, we've got a question here which says, from 2013, where must firms publish the data? We're expecting firms to publish the data on their own websites. They could publish the data in any format that they feel comfortable or able to do so. So there is no specific requirement in terms of where you should be publishing. Some firms already have systems in place where they publish data, and we would encourage them to continue to do so.
Are consultants working with firms to be included? We are including consultants who have been employed within a firm for 3 months or longer. We're including also part-time workers and temporary workers, again, those who have been employed at the firm for 3 months or longer, and those employed to provide support functions such as secretarial staff and others, and those under secondment contracts as well.
We have another question around publication, which is where firms are already collecting this information, publishing it, but also provide it to Law Society, and whether they would have to continue to do this every year. My answer and my response to that is yes, you will have to continue to collect this data on an annual basis and publish it. However, we are very conscious that we need to look at whether there is a possibility where we could consolidate or bring in some kind of consolidation where you're only providing the information once. And we have had a number of queries around this. But in the short term, I'm afraid you're going to have to collect the data and publish it. In the long term, this is something that we are currently discussing and considering. Okay, we've got a question around, will corps have to report non-compliance with this as a material breach to the SRA? This is an interesting question because as we are not putting a burden on firms this year, and we've used an external host to kind of collect this data for us, this year it is not for the corps. The corps are not going to be under any pressure to report non-compliance to us. However, in setting out arrangements for next year, which is through the annual reporting cycle, we are considering whether it will be the corp who will be responsible for the collection exercise and for ensuring the data is collected and published. We will be obviously providing some further guidance next year, which is going to be updated, where you will be able to get some further information in terms of what our arrangements are for next year.
We have a question on socio-economic factors and to give examples of what that might be. Some of the questions relating to that relate to the level of education a person may have, or whether an individual is the first person in their family to attend university and which school or college was attended.
Okay, we have a question here which is around where firms are already collecting this data, can't we just send you a link to it? And I know this goes back to the point about how many times do we need to collect this data. You cannot send us a link to your data. I mean, it would be nice for us to get a link to it, but you're going to have to do the separate exercise this year and collect it on an annual basis. But this is very much something that we are going to take into consideration. There is a question here about timescales, and in terms of timescales for this year, we are intending for this collection exercise to take place between July and September. And I will hand over to my colleague Afia, who knows the actual date as to when the email to the authorised signatories will go out.
So we're looking to send out the email to the authorised signatory within the next week. We're just identifying some technical support that we need to have put in place. So it will be live imminently. We understand that we're already a couple of weeks into July, so we will move this process a couple of weeks into October to provide a 3-month window for when this diversity data needs to be collected. A question, if we're already collecting the data, can't we just send you a link to it? We do want to say again that in terms of that, because we want to ensure consistency across the information that we're collecting, that unfortunately we are having to ask all firms to collect this data again.
We have a question here around whether we're going to be providing some guidance next year around publication. We are currently looking at providing and updating the guidance that is going to be on our website for this year. So that it's much more tailored to what your requirements would be for next year. And within that, we will be providing an overview framework around how we expect publication or how we expect you to publish your data.
Okay, so how will you know which members of staff have or have not completed the questionnaire? You won't be able to know because the survey is anonymous, but what we will know is that the percentage of individuals from a particular firm who have submitted questionnaires. So we are looking at that within a firm where there is a 30% or less response rate, then we would come back to that firm to understand what the reasons were for individuals not wishing to complete the questionnaire, for example. But as the questionnaire is anonymous, an individual's name or personal details will not be linked back to that particular questionnaire that they have submitted. If you would like to confirm who your firm's authorised signatory is, please have a look via My SRA, or alternatively email diversity@sra.org.uk and we can check the individual who is the authorised signatory for your firm, and we can let you know who that is.
Okay, there is a question here around whether we're going to use this data for benchmarking between solicitors and barristers. At this current stage, the answer is possibly not. The LSB initially had wanted the legal services workforce to have consistent data across the board and the publication to be consistent. However, that is not going to happen because the Bar Standards Board obviously has taken quite a different approach where chambers are going to be collecting the information and publishing it. As far as the SRA is concerned, we are going to be requiring all firms to kind of publish the data from next year. So there may be a possibility to do some benchmarking, but because they may not be consistent in the way the data is published, it might not be possible to get any kind of value out of real benchmarking between different legal professions.
We have had a question around alternative business structures. For this first year, we're not including alternative business structures in this process, but for future years, they will be included in terms of regulated and non-regulated individuals from an alternative business structure to complete the diversity questionnaire. We are looking to see how we engage with Survey Lab and how this process works this year, and we may look to incorporate this process into our annual regulatory reporting for next year, but we need to identify which may be the best avenue to see how this diversity data collection process will work. So will that be with Survey Lab, or will that be part of annual regulatory reporting for 2013 and onwards?
Okay, we have a question here about whether partners are to be included as well as employees. The answer is yes. The data collection exercise covers all employees working within an entity or firm. That includes those that we regulate, partners and authorized individuals, as well as those that are non-lawyers working in your firm. Okay. We have a question here around publication and confidentiality, whether that's at odds for small firms, and will we monitor difficulties and issues around breaches of confidentiality? Yes, we will, and we are very, very conscious around the publication requirement around the data collection exercise. And there is some guidance that's been issued by the Equality and Human Rights Commission as well as the Information Commissioner's Office, which looks at data sets around different characteristics, i.e. if you've got 10 or less people under a particular diversity characteristic, the possibility of considering not publishing that data. So when we set up the arrangements for next year, we will be providing with some further guidance around this, but we are very conscious around the issues of confidentiality and data protection.
We have a question around can the data be analysed in terms of job grade and part-time working? It will be able to be analysed by job grade, not part-time working, and we will look to see the aggregated diversity data, what that data will look like, and in terms of mobility and transparency within the profession, what that overall diversity data looks like. So we will be able to analyse and cut the data via different means, including job role and job grade. For the SRA itself, how is this part of the SRA's regulatory role? As we are an approved regulator, we need to demonstrate we are meeting the regulatory objectives set out in the Legal Services Act. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, that is to encourage an independent, strong, diverse and effective legal profession. And the diversity data collection exercise will help us to promote transparency in the legal sector with the ultimate aim of increasing diversity and social mobility in the legal workforce.
Okay, we've got a question here around do we have targets, minimum targets for certain categories? I don't really know what the question's asking. I suppose there are no minimum targets, but this is around publication. I think I've already covered this, that this is an area that we're looking at in terms of publication and data protection.
There's a question again around publication of the firm's diversity data. The Legal Services Board has agreed with our proposal to relax the publication requirement this year. So you're not required to publish your firm's diversity data following this first collection exercise in 2012. However, you will be required to publish your diversity data from 2013 onwards. In terms of smaller firms or small firms with potentially 10 or less employees, you would need to have a look at the data protection requirements around that. And the information we have received is that where there are 10 or less in a particular category or 10 or less in a firm, and employees are able to be identified by that particular area, then it's not recommended to publish that information.
Okay, Okay, we have a question here around the sort of kind of supervision and enforcement action we would take, which says what sort of penalties will there be for non-compliance with data collection requirements? This is something that we are actually considering, and I think one of the things that my colleague Asia has talked about is that we reserve the right to kind of look at where we have no responses from a particular firm, to ask some specific questions around the sort of arrangements and encouragement they've provided and their approach to communicating with their employees. So that would be our starting point. In terms of penalties, I would like to assure you that's the kind of last resort. We don't want to get down to penalties. We are hoping that actually the firms are going to recognize that David's data collection exercise has some clear benefits, both for themselves but for the whole of the legal sector as well. And employees will be assured through kind of our assurances around data protection, and will be encouraged to provide this data to us. However, that said, obviously we as a regulator, we do reserve the right, and where there is non-compliance, we will be setting out our kind of thinking around what action we take following non-compliance.
Somebody asked a question, is this webinar being uploaded to YouTube? We will ask our media technicians when we get back to the SRA if this is the case and if we are able to do that.
Okay, we have a question here about what does Principle 9 say. And Principle 9 says you must run your business or carry out your role in the business in a way that encourages equality of opportunity and respect for diversity. And I'm sure that you will agree this is very much aligned to kind of the diversity data collection requirement that we are currently undertaking.
And some of the outcomes from Chapter 2 around Principle 9 are that you do not discriminate unlawfully or victimize or harass anyone in the course of your professional dealings. Your approach to recruitment and employment encourages equality of opportunity and respect for diversity. And you make reasonable adjustments to ensure that disabled clients, employees or managers are not placed at a substantial disadvantage compared to those who are not disabled. If an individual is employed at your firm, and that would include cleaning staff or security staff, then they would be included in the survey. If they are outsourced, then they would not be included in the survey. So only employees who are employed at your firm will be included in this diversity data collection exercise. In terms of whether the completion of the survey is mandatory or voluntary, completing the diversity questionnaire is voluntary for an individual, and each question also has a prefer not to say if an individual does not wish to fill in any particular question. So in terms of the firms facilitating this process, we are encouraging that to happen, but for the survey itself to complete the diversity questionnaire, it's voluntary for the individual whether they wish to complete that questionnaire or not.
Okay, we have a question here around businesses in commerce and industry, whether they have to comply. Well, if you are a firm or entity that the SRA regulates, then yes, you will have to comply with the data collection exercise. However, if this refers to in-house solicitors working in other businesses, at this current time, the data collection exercise is not extended to cover those individuals.
What is the SRA going to do with the diversity data? The SRA is going to publish a report setting out the diversity profile of the profession, highlighting any key trends emerging as a result of the data collection process. The data will be aggregated, so it's not going to be possible to identify a particular firm from the data we publish. And this information is going to help us better understand the impact of our work and inform how we develop our approach to regulation. We are not going to publish data about individual firms. However, the data is going to be held by the SRA and will form part of the information that we hold about the firm, and it may be used to inform our regulatory approach of the firm as well. We are giving a 3-month window for firms to encourage employees to submit the diversity questionnaire. In terms of additional time, We're not able to offer additional time running into the end of this year or early next year, as we need to report back on the data and the aggregated data we collect to identify key trends and the impact of our work. So we're not able to provide individual firms with a longer period of time than the 3-month window for this.
Can I just come into that, Asia? If firms, where you are a firm that you're having specific difficulty, if you are able to contact us and tell us as to why you're not able to kind of comply with the timescales that we set out, that would be really helpful because we can look at it by case by case.
In terms of publication methods for future years, you can publish the data on your firm's website or even in your annual report. It is up to the firm where they wish to publish this data. So in terms of kind of the method that you use, that will be entirely up to yourself. But a website or an annual report is absolutely applicable. In terms of the prefer not to say, we are looking for this initial year where individuals are requested to submit the diversity questionnaire. But in terms of having that knowledge of individuals that prefer not to say also gives us an idea of where people are comfortable with providing their diversity information or not. So it will provide us with some results to encourage improvement in the diversity data and collection exercise for future years, and also for firms to encourage employees to submit that as well. We're looking to email the authorised signatory in the next couple of weeks, and as soon as we do this, the authorised signatory will receive an email which they will have to respond to, and the first email that they receive will be asking for the number of employees employed in the firm, and they will be receiving this email within the next couple of weeks.
We have a question here about the role of the Law Society and the support available to firms. The Law Society is supporting the SRA in carrying out this data collection exercise and has recently just published a practice note around the diversity data collection exercise. The Law Society and us are actually engaging with the profession through various events across the country, and they have also updated and amended and aligned their diversity charter questionnaire in line with the model questionnaire that we are going to be using for the data collection exercise. And it's important that if you need any further support, that you can contact the quality team at the Law Society.
How is this process going to benefit our firm? Well, as Marylis was saying, diversity monitoring can benefit your firm in many ways, and this would be recognised for signatories to the Law Society's Diversity and Inclusion Charter. Some of the benefits of diversity monitoring have been, for example, it's enabled firms to identify where barriers exist that prevent the best use of all available talent. It can help to prevent costly discrimination claims by identifying problems early. It can help to win business by evidencing performance, and it also helps strengthen a firm's reputation. Where things may change over time, for example, people's religion or belief, or marital status, for example, as we are looking to collect this diversity data every year, we will look to track over a period of time changes in the diversity makeup of the profession as a whole, and that will be broken down by individual protected characteristics such as sexual orientation. We had a question on whether the profession were consulted about this. The Legal Services Board did consult widely and also engage with the profession about the proposals. And information, if you would like more information about the consultation process, is published on the LSB's website under the title 15th of December, Increasing Diversity in the Workforce.
We have a question here about confirming whether this is a requirement for in-house legal departments. We have been discussing this with the Legal Services Board, and at this current time, this requirement doesn't extend to in-house legal departments. However, the LSB is going to be looking at this for future years, so it's not ruling it out, but not for this year.
We are asking in-house solicitors to update their diversity profile via My SRA.
Okay, we have a question here which says, which asks, will you carry out another consultation or review, say, in a year's time to see how well the process is going? The reason we were tempted to have a standalone exercise this year is very much to try and evaluate and explore what the experience of the profession might be. So, in a sense, this year we are going to be reviewing the results that we get, which will then inform our arrangements for next year. So the answer to your question, I suppose, is yes, but we're not going to be doing this on an annual basis. What would be really helpful for us is for you to send us any comments or any feedback about your experiences in undertaking this exercise and your employees when they receive the questionnaire. That would really be helpful so that we can kind of inform future years' arrangements.
A question has been asked about who can see the data provided through the diversity questionnaire. The data you provide will only be visible to specialist staff at Survey Lab who are collecting and anonymising the data on behalf of the SRA. And although Survey Lab will know which organisation you're part of, they won't have any other means of identifying you. If all employees choose not to reply, how does the authorised signatory report this? If all employees choose not to reply, we will be getting this information through the submitted diversity questionnaire. So where if staff have put for every single question prefer not to say, this will be data collected via that individual firm. And the authorised signatory will not need to report this as that data will be collected via Survey Lab's online diversity collection process. Are we going to ask questions of employees under the age of 18? We are not going to be asking employees under the age of 18 to complete the diversity questionnaire, and we will make some of these questions clear in our questions and answers, which we have published on our website. So if you would like further information and some questions, frequently asked questions individuals and firms have asked around this process, please go online to our website where we have published a whole list of questions and answers. But in terms of employees under the age of 18, we will not be requesting firms to ask them to fill in this diversity questionnaire.
We have a question here around, will the outcome of the survey affect the way in which the SRA fulfills its regulatory objectives or cause it to change its strategic approach? It's an interesting questionnaire. Obviously, the outcome of the survey, it's not that it will affect the way the SRA fulfills its regulatory objective, but it will impact in terms of the outcomes that we will be able to deliver, which is why we would really encourage and appreciate your support in making this a successful collection exercise and also putting in place arrangements and systems so that you're ready to collect the diversity data next year and to publish it. Okay, this is obviously the last question that I will be taking. If you do have any further questions, you can actually direct them to www.diversity@sra.org.uk. And the web address is www.sra.org.uk/diversity-data, or you can email us at diversity@sra.org.uk. And the CPD authorization code for you for today is ZZJ/MLDS, and it's 1 hour worth of CPD points. That ends the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us, and we would really appreciate your feedback, and the satisfaction survey will appear on your screen. Please complete it. If the survey doesn't appear or there are difficulties, please type into the screen and somebody will be available to help you. Thank you.